Now I would like to call upon stage Sir Arun Anand to give his special remarks on the topic idea of nationalism, West and East.
Thank you, Dr. Pandya, for inviting me, and thanks this August gathering for taking out time to listen to me. See, I don't have the vocabulary of diplomats. I've been a journalist and kind of more of a roving editor. So I'll come straight to the point. I was listening to Ambassador just now, and he was talking about, one of the things which he picked up was said was about ideologies. That ideologies, the emergence of ideologies, and there's a current trend also, as the subject of the discussion is that the West is quite wary of, the rise of nationalism. And one of the key reasons, I would say, I have covered Ministry of External Affairs as a journalist also. I've had the opportunity to travel abroad a little bit and interact with diplomats also. There's a lot of foreign journalists who come to India. So I've done a couple of books on this issue. So when they talk to me, I remember last time there was this New York Times bureau chief from Paris. He had come to India. So we had a conversation. So the conversation ended in 20 minutes. When I was explaining to him what is Hindu nationalism or what is Indian nationalism, he said it sounds too good to be true. So I think one of the fundamental problems which we are facing in India, and we are also at fault because we have not been able to make the West understand this, the difference between the terminologies. It's a fundamental difference. There is a difference between the concept of nation state and rashtra. There is a difference between the concept of religion and dharma. There is a difference between the concept of spirituality and adhyatma. The problem is that we as Indians, and especially the current government, we think in context of dharma, we think in context of adhyatma, we think in context of rashtra. The West interprets it in context of nation state. The West interprets in context of spirituality or in context of religion. I would like to make a bold statement here that I think Indian nationalism, and I'll speak largely on basically the difference between the Indian nationalism and Western nationalism. And as I said, with a caveat that we are also at fault that we have not been able to make the West understand about this, and it's largely because of a historical context that the academia and the whole public discourse was dominated either by the colonial historians or academicians or by the Marxists. And I find it very funny, when the West, and even in there's one common thing we often use the term left liberal. It's a funny thing. Left cannot be liberal. The largest number of deaths have happened in, and killings have happened in communist regimes. So I think we need to relook at the concept of terminologies, and I would just make a now brief this thing. See, and I'm going to use the term Hindu nationalism, not Indian nationalism. Is Hindu nationalism something that one should be wary of? That is the notion promoted by the Western media and intelligentsia. The general line of argument that is taken is that Hindu nationalism will lead to Hindu majoritarianism, the dominance of the Hindus. Now, these interpretations are actually an outcome of a straight-jacketed conceptual framework that has emerged from West's own experience, and hence, in all humility, I want to say that it is ill-equipped to deal with the subjects like Hindu nationalism. See, the fundamental problem with the Western academy and media is that they are looking at the concept of Hindu nationalism from a Western framework. The rise of nation state in the late medieval period in Europe led to the rise of nationalism there. But the concept of nationalism in Europe was parochial, narrow, and negative. Nationalism in European context primarily, or Western context primarily, meant subjugation of others to serve the interest of the dominant race in a geographical region. The logical corollary of this concept was that once the dominant race captures the political power in a country, then it should dominate the other countries militarily, and that is the only road where nationalism leads to. So the rise of nationalism in Europe resulted in colonization of large parts of Asia, Africa, and Latin America, civil wars within the Western nation states, countless military conflicts between nations, at least two world wars, and ethnic cleansing of minorities in the Western countries by the dominant political powers who had captured the power riding on the wave of nationalism. So they have every reason to be very off about this. So that is why I say significant sections of society as well as academia, media, intelligentsia invest are wary of nationalism, and that's fine. But what is Hindu nationalism? Hindu nationalism is quite different from European or the Western nationalism. And in fact, when Europe was going through the dark ages, nationalism was already well established in Hindu culture. I would suggest everybody should read Radha Kumud Mukherjee's book, which was published in 1920s. It's called The Fundamental Unity of India. And so when, as I said, Europe was going through the dark age, according to Radha Kumud Mukherjee, the gospel of wholesome nationalism was already a vital force in the public life of India. All the conditions that make for the growth of a sense of nationhood were fully developed and long known in ancient India. The first and the foremost, and I would end with this thing, the first and the foremost requirement for rise of nationalism is to have a clear geographical boundary. And if you go back 2500 years before, in Vishnu Puran, I'll quote a couplet, a Sanskrit couplet. It's Uttaram Yat Samudrasya Himadrishchev Dakshinam Varsham Tad Bhatram Nama Bharti Yatra Santiti. The English translation is the country that is north of the sea and the south of Himalayas is known as Bharat, and its residents are known as Bhartiyas. So we had a clear-cut geographical boundary, and as you see, Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam, this was the manifestation of Hindu nationalism. This is the manifestation of Hindu nationalism. And as Dr. Pandya had also said, we never attacked, we never annexed any country. So I think the West clearly it need not be wary of Hindu nationalism, and I think it needs to change its viewpoint. But for that, probably we also need to change our viewpoint. And I think the way bureaucrats are recruited in our country, diplomats are recruited in our country, we have an examination called UPSC, which is conducted by UPSC, Union Public Service Commission. The whole course curriculum is that if you do not understand, if you do not study it in the Western context, so it's a paradoxical situation. You can't get into the civil services. Then the whole training module is also, I have had the opportunity to go and deliver some lectures to the trainees, trainee civil servants. So I looked at the whole curriculum. It's still that same curriculum. We are not training our diplomats, our bureaucrats in Indian context, in true Indian context. And if we expect that the rest of the world will understand what we want to say, so I think it's not fair. Basically, it would be very unfair on our part. So I'm not blaming the West for not understanding what Hindu nationalism is or how India thinks. I just want to make a humble request that you need to look at the alternative literature. You need to look at the alternative texts. And I think the West also has a big challenge in that, because I have seen from Stanford to John Hopkins to Cambridge to Oxford. So all the academic institutions are dominated by the so-called left liberals. So it's not going to be an easy task. So I think if we will have fuzzy thinking, and if our fundamental concepts are not clear, so whatever discussions we may have or whatever we may plan, so we are not going to reach the destination what we deserve, what this whole world deserves. Thank you very much.